the heart of New York, where glass and steel skyscrapers vie for space with dreams, two worlds existed, separated by a concrete abyss. On one side, Isabella Harrington, the heiress who had everything, except a real reason to get up each morning. Her life was a succession of gilded halls, dresses that cost fortunes, and perfectly rehearsed smiles, while inside her soul withered from so much futility. On the other side of town, Miguel and his community fought for something far more precious than money: the simple right to exist, to call home a piece of town that the rich considered just another business opportunity. Where Isabella saw numbers on spreadsheets, Miguel saw life stories. Where she had learned about profits, he taught about dignity. The most extraordinary paradox is that the one who seemed the poorest of all, homeless, without resources, without influence, would be the very one who would save the billionaire heiress from her own wealth. In a twist that defies all conventional logic, this story proves that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what truly matters, and that the greatest treasures don't fit in vaults, but multiply when shared. Isabella lived a modern-day fairy tale life in Chicago, but it was a story written by someone else. While she paraded at charity balls in dresses that cost more than a car, her smile was as artificial as the jewels that adorned her. Inside, she felt like a bird singing the wrong song in a gilded cage, yearning for a melody it didn't yet know. Her soul cried out for a purpose greater than being a simple decorator of luxurious events. Her only anchor was her father, a New York business titan who had raised her alone after a family tragedy. Isabella feared disappointing him more than anything, carrying that weight like an invisible cloak of obligation. Even in her loneliest moments in the Fifth Avenue mansion, she clung to his approval as if it were a security blanket. But every glance in the mirror reminded her of the empty persona she needed to maintain, the perfect daughter who wasn't really her. The bodyguards who followed her everywhere weren't just protecting her physical safety. They were guardians of her prison of privilege. Isabella began to commit small, silent acts of rebellion: an unauthorized stroll through Central Park, a coffee in a neighborhood her father disapproved of. In these brief escapes, she felt the first breath of a transformation her heart so desperately desired. Something big was about to change her destiny forever. During one of her secret escapades through Brooklyn, Isabella stopped in front of a wall painted with vibrant colors that told stories of struggle and hope. The graffiti showed intertwined hands forming a ladder against a gray sky, with words that resonated within her. Our true wealth lies in what we share. In that instant, like an urban miracle, she realized that her art could be more than decoration. It could be a voice. It was there that Miguel found her, a community leader whose charisma didn't come from titles or possessions, but from the genuine compassion in his eyes. "This mural speaks about our community," he explained, pointing to the colorful figures. "Art shouldn't be locked away in galleries, but should breathe in the streets and speak for those who have no voice." His words ignited in Isabella a flame that no expensive art course had ever been able to ignite. Miguel took her to see the community center he ran, a place where every crack in the wall told a story of overcoming adversity. Isabella saw people looking at Miguel not with the fearful respect her father inspired, but with an admiration born of true love. For the first time, she understood what it meant to make a difference in an authentic way, and this revelation both frightened and delighted her. The world crumbled when Isabella discovered that her father's next project was precisely the demolition of the neighborhood that had captured her heart. The words "urban revitalization" in the corporate report sounded like a death sentence for the community she now considered her second home. She felt the ground disappear beneath her precious feet, as if reality itself were collapsing around her. Determined to avert tragedy, Isabella confronted her father in his office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "Dad, these are real people with dreams and stories," she pleaded, showing him photos of the residents. The icy response hit her like a punch. "Business is business, Isabella. Emotion doesn't pay dividends." For the first time, she saw the coldness behind the man she had always idolized. That night, Isabella did something unthinkable. She transferred her personal savings, a fortune for most people, to the community account. Each click on the computer was an act of silent courage, a rebellion that simultaneously terrified and empowered her. But deep down, a persistent voice asked, would this be enough to avert the impending disaster? The money Isabella donated, though significant to her, was like a drop in the ocean compared to the forces of the New York real estate market. Visiting the community center weeks later, she saw Miguel and other volunteers counting coins on a worn table, trying to figure out how they would pay the legal costs to delay the eviction. His expression of gratitude upon discovering the anonymous donation hurt more than any reprimand. She felt like a fraudster, a privileged spectator in someone else's struggle. In the days that followed, Isabella began to question each of her intentions. Was she just another bored heiress playing at being a revolutionary, seeking thrill in the misery of others? While helping to serve meals at the shelter, her well-cared-for hands contrasted brutally with the calloused hands of the other volunteers. Each thank you she received sounded like a reminder of the abyss that separated her reality from theirs. Back at the mansion, the silence of the empty hallways oppressed her more than ever. Isabella wandered through the empty rooms like a ghost, each valuable work of art seeming to mock her inner conflict. She picked up an old photo album, pictures of her mother, who had passed away years ago, working on social projects, and wondered what she would have done at this crossroads. The hope she had initially felt gave way to corrosive doubt. The last straw came when he witnessed a family being evicted from the building next to the community center. He watched helplessly as a single mother and her 2 children were put out on the street with their belongings piled up on the curb. The shame of his own wealth burned like fire in his veins. That night, looking at the illuminated city from her room, Isabella realized that her transformation needed to be deeper, or she would return to the gilded cage forever. It was seeing the children at the shelter drawing their lost homes that gave Isabella the insight that would change everything. She noticed how their art, though naive, carried an emotional truth that was lacking in her own technically perfect paintings. Picking up some pencils, she joined them on the floor, and for the first time, let her hand create without planning, letting emotion guide the strokes. The result was chaotic, imperfect, but vibrant with life. The following week, Isabella began a daring project. A giant mural on the exterior wall of the shelter threatened with eviction. She worked from dawn, her designer clothes stained with paint, while residents and volunteers joined her, each adding their own touch to the collective work. The mural told the story of the community, its struggles, its losses, but also its stubborn hope. Art ceased to be mere ornament and became a witness. While painting, Isabella discovered a new language. Her brushstrokes no longer sought the empty perfection of galleries, but the raw truth of the streets. Each figure she created, each color she chose, was a silent cry against the injustice she witnessed. The resilience she saw in the eyes of the residents now also resided in her own heart, transforming fear into determination, doubt into conviction. The moment of ultimate clarity came when a girl from the shelter pointed to a figure in the mural and said, "That's me, right? The one who's fighting." Isabella looked at her paint-stained hands, at the community around her, and understood that her redemption lay not in running away from who she was, but in using her privileges as her only true weapon, giving voice to the voiceless. The socially conscious artist she had always wanted to be was finally born. When the mural began attracting the attention of the local media, Isabella's father finally discovered where she was spending her days. He showed up at the community center in his impeccable Italian suit, an iceberg of disapproval amidst the warmth of the place. "Isabella, this has gone too far," he said in the sharp voice he used in board meetings. "You're playing with serious things. Go home now." The scene became a clash of 2 irreconcilable worlds. On one side, the businessman who built an empire on concrete and profit. On the other, the daughter who had discovered that communities are not numbers on spreadsheets, but fabrics of human stories. The residents watched in silence, understanding that this particular battle represented something much bigger than a family argument. It was then that Isabella did something she herself didn't expect. She took the keys to the bachelorette apartment her father had given her on her 18th birthday, a symbol of her controlled life, and returned them. "I can't go back to a house that's a prison, Dad," she said, surprised by the calm in her own voice. The courage she had found didn't come from rebellion, but from the deep conviction that she was finally on the right side of history. The father's disappointed look cut deeper than any criticism, but Isabella held his gaze. As he left, she felt the emptiness of the potential loss, but also the solemn weight of her choice. Miguel approached and offered her a place to stay, not out of pity, but out of genuine solidarity. That night, for the first time, Isabella would sleep on a donated mattress, but she would feel a peace that the most expensive silks could never provide. The first few days in the community were a reality check for Isabella. waking up in a shared room with 3 other volunteers, queuing for the communal bathroom, and helping prepare breakfast for 50 people, made her appreciate small luxuries she had previously considered basic. Her hands, once accustomed only to holding fine paintbrushes, were now learning to peel vegetables in industrial quantities and fix leaks. Each callus that formed was a trophy of her real transformation. Despite the physical exhaustion, Isabella discovered a new energy working alongside people who had lost everything, but not their dignity. She learned from Donna Maria, a 70-year-old woman who had lost her home after her husband's death, that hope could be found in the simple act of sharing a hot coffee. I listened to the stories of Carlos, the former construction worker who taught plumbing workshops to young people. Each person showed her a new angle of human resilience. Her art became the bridge between her past and her present. Isabella began organizing painting workshops for the children at the shelter, teaching them to express their pain and dreams through color. The walls of the community center were filled with drawings that told stories of loss, but also of resilience. She saw how art healed not only the creator, but also those who witnessed it, including herself, who finally found the purpose she'd been searching for. When the news of the impending eviction became official, Isabella felt the weight of the responsibility for her choices. The community looked to her not as the wealthy heiress, but as a genuine ally. At the meeting they organized to plan their resistance. She offered not her money, but her communication skills and her understanding of the corporate world that threatened to destroy her new home. For the first time, she felt truly needed, not because of her last name, but because of who she had become. Isabella's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity, to humanize the struggle through art and media. She organized an exhibition on the steps of New York City Hall, where residents displayed portraits they had painted in workshops. Each painting told the story of a life that would be affected by the evictions. The local newspapers, initially skeptical, couldn't resist the visual power of that open-air gallery, and the coverage began to shift. Meanwhile, Miguel worked on political networking, scheduling meetings with city council members and community leaders. The pair discovered that their complementary skills created an unstoppable force. Miguel's practical compassion and Isabella's strategic vision. Together they managed to schedule a public hearing where residents could speak directly to decision-makers. A small miracle in New York City bureaucracy. The turning point came when an influential newspaper published a cover story featuring Isabella's mural, linking the struggle of that specific community to the wider housing crisis in New York. Suddenly, the cause gained unexpected supporters. University students organized vigils, churches from other neighborhoods offered support, and even some local business owners spoke out against the demolition. Social justice, previously an abstract concept, became a concrete and visible demand. At the height of the campaign, Isabella received an unexpected visit. Her former housekeeper, Mrs. Wilkins, appeared at the community center with a box of documents. "Your mother would be proud of you," she whispered, handing over social projects that Isabella's late mother had secretly developed years before. At that moment, Isabella understood that her activism was not a rebellion against the family legacy, but rather its continuation, a discovery that filled her with new determination. The day of the public hearing arrived with palpable tension in the air. The City Hall lobby was divided in two. On one side, residents dressed in Save Our Home campaign t-shirts. On the other, the well-dressed aides from Isabella's father's corporation. When Robert Harrington himself entered the room, his gaze didn't search for his daughter among the crowd, a cut deeper than any words could express. One by one, the residents took to the podium to tell their stories. Carlos spoke of how the community center had helped him overcome alcoholism after losing his job. Donna Maria described how the workshop saved her from the loneliness of widowhood. Children read simple letters that moved even the most hardened bureaucrats. Each testimony was a nail in the coffin of the demolition project, and Isabella saw, with growing hope, that they were winning the battle of hearts. When it was her turn to speak, Isabella surprised everyone by addressing her father directly. "You taught me that Harrington means excellence, Dad, but you forgot to teach me that excellence without humanity is empty." Her voice didn't tremble, though tears threatened. "These people aren't asking for charity, they're asking for justice, and today I'm here on the right side of history, even if it means standing against you." Robert Harrington's response was cold and calculated, emotionally dismantling each argument with economic data and legal expertise. But when he finished, something extraordinary happened. Miguel stood up without asking permission and posed the question that would change everything. "Mr. Harrington, When was the last time you visited one of the neighborhoods your developments revitalized? When was the last time you looked into the eyes of the people you evict? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any speech. The tension in the town hall lobby reached its peak when Miguel asked his direct question. Robert Harrington maintained his impenetrable posture, but those who knew him well could see the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusted his glasses. "I don't need to personally visit every property to understand numbers and contracts," he replied, but his voice had lost a tenth of its previous conviction. Isabella watched her father as if seeing him for the first time, not as a titan, but as a man trapped in his own prison of figures and spreadsheets. In the days following the hearing, an unexpected twist occurred. One of the main investors in Harrington's project withdrew, citing concerns about corporate image after negative publicity. Others followed suit, and what seemed inevitable began to crumble. The community celebrated, but Isabella felt a bittersweet victory. She knew the personal cost was yet to come. The redemption she sought arrived accompanied by painful losses. Robert Harrington didn't speak to his daughter for 3 weeks. When he finally appeared at the community center, he brought with him not the fury Isabella expected, but a weary resignation. "You got what you wanted," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The project was canceled. I hope your new life brings you the happiness I couldn't provide." His words sounded like a final farewell, and Isabella felt her heart break as she understood that she had won the battle, but had probably lost her father. That night, while helping to close the community center, Isabella found Miguel looking at the mural they had painted together. "Sometimes the greatest victories hurt more than the defeats," he said with his quiet wisdom. Isabella nodded, feeling the full weight of her choices. She had saved the community, but the price was an emptiness that no celebration could fill. The transformation demanded sacrifices she never imagined when she began this journey. With the threat of demolition averted, the community flourished in ways no one expected. The same newspapers that had reported on the struggle now published profiles of the local artists discovered in Isabella's workshops. A small gallery in the East Village offered space for a group exhibition, and for the first time, shelter residents saw their work valued and sold. Hope became tangible with each small success. Isabella, now fully integrated into community life, took on the role of coordinator of artistic projects. Her days were filled with meetings with local schools, planning new workshops, and seeking crowdfunding to expand the work. The hands that once only held champagne glasses at cocktail parties now handled budgets and wrote sponsorship proposals, and she discovered she was much better at it than she had ever been in her previous life. The surprise came when she received an invitation to speak at a philanthropy forum in Boston. Upon taking the stage, she saw in the audience not only other activists, but also heirs to fortunes who, like her, sought meaning beyond consumption. Her story of personal overcoming and community activism resonated powerfully, and after the talk, several young people approached her wanting to know how they could use their privileges for social causes. Back in New York, Isabella found a letter at the community center. It was from a lawyer representing her father, but not with bad news. Robert Harrington, quietly and away from the spotlight, had donated a significant sum to a foundation that Isabella could manage independently. There was no explicit reconciliation, just a practical act that spoke louder than 1,000 words. The justice she had sought for others arrived accompanied by a glimpse of family peace. The cultural center born from the community's struggle became a beacon of creativity in the neighborhood. Named House of Second Chance, the space offered everything from art classes for children to vocational training for adults. Isabella watched with pride as the place that had almost been demolished now flourished, proving that communities, when supported, can find their own redemption. Each smile from the children in the workshops was a testament to the power of collective hope. Miguel and Isabella discovered that their professional partnership naturally evolved into something deeper. In the rare moments of calm, between meetings and projects, they shared dreams not only for the community, but for their own lives. The love that blossomed between them was unlike anything Isabella had ever known, not based on status or appearances, but on mutual admiration for who each had become through their shared struggle. When Robert Harrington showed up unannounced one Saturday afternoon, Isabella braced herself for another confrontation. But the man who entered the cultural center wasn't the business titan he once was. His shoulders were slightly hunched, his gaze less intent. "Your mother would have loved this place," he said, watching the children painting at the communal tables. In that moment, Isabella saw not her billionaire father, but the widower who had lost his beloved wife, and, in the process, forgotten how to love. The reconciliation was slow and filled with eloquent silences, but it began that day. Robert started visiting regularly, first as an observer, then as a volunteer, the former CEO discovering unsuspecting talents for organizing donations and connecting the community with resources. Father and daughter learned to know each other again, not through grand words, but in the sharing of meaningful work. The transformation, Isabella understood, wasn't just hers. It was a current that could touch even the hardest hearts. The success of Casa de Segunda Chance began to resonate beyond the neighborhood's boundaries. An independent documentary about the community's struggle won awards at festivals, bringing in donations from all over the country. Isabella watched with emotion as the center she had saved was now saving others. Families found temporary housing. Artists discovered their talents. Children rediscovered joy. Each story of overcoming adversity was a testament to the power of compassion transformed into action. With the new resources, Isabella was able to expand her work in ways she never imagined. She created an internship program for young people from the community and partner companies, breaking down invisible barriers that separated the worlds of wealth and poverty. Her understanding of both sides became her greatest strength. She spoke the language of boardrooms and the streets with equal authenticity, building bridges where before there were only walls. Miguel took over the executive management of the center, while Isabella focused on fundraising and strategic partnerships. Together they formed an unbeatable team. Their community vision combined with their corporate knowledge created innovative solutions to long-standing problems. The love between them grew quietly, fueled not by grand romantic gestures, but by the daily admiration for their mutual commitment to social justice. On a sunny Saturday, during the center's one-year anniversary celebration, Isabella looked around and saw the miracle they had built. Her father chatting animatedly with Donna Maria about expanding the housing program, former homeless people now working as monitors, children running carefree among picnic tables. At that moment she understood that true wealth lay not in what was accumulated, but in what was shared, and her heart overflowed with gratitude. Isabella's story reached unexpected heights when a major magazine invited her for a national interview. She sat before the reporter not as the spoiled heiress she once was, but as a woman who had found her purpose. "I'm not a heroine," she insisted, "just someone who finally understood that courage is doing what is right, not what is easy." Her words, full of authenticity, touched millions. The published profile generated a flood of responses, from young people from wealthy families seeking guidance on how to use their privileges, to community leaders thanking her for giving visibility to their causes. Isabella unintentionally became a symbol of a new form of activism, not based on guilt, but on the practical hope that everyone can make a difference where they are, with what they have. Columbia University invited her to teach a semester-long course on art and social transformation. In her first class, she looked at the young, eager faces and saw echoes of her own journey. "Art doesn't save the world," she told the students, "but it saves people, and saved people can save the world." Her words resonated in the attentive silence of the room, planting seeds that would blossom into future transformations. The most significant recognition, however, came in the form of a simple handwritten letter. It was from a young woman who, inspired by Isabella's story, had convinced her own family to invest in a community project in Detroit. "You showed me that I don't have to choose between my family and my values," she wrote. Isabella treasured the letter, proof that her personal redemption could inspire others. 2 years after the confrontation at City Hall, Isabella had found a balance between her worlds. She maintained a small apartment near the community center, but also regularly dined with her father at his mansion, now conversing as equals about philanthropic projects. Robert Harrington, transformed by his own journey, had become an unexpected advocate for responsible social investment, using his influence to change corporate policies. Isabella's relationship with Miguel flourished in shared simplicity. Their meetings weren't in expensive restaurants, but on walks in the park discussing new projects, or quiet evenings at home planning the future. They discovered that love, when built on shared values and mutual respect, was the most solid foundation for a meaningful life, a discovery that represented Isabella's greatest personal achievement. The foundation Isabella created with her father's initial donation now supported dozens of communities in 3 different states. Her model, combining business expertise with community knowledge, proved revolutionarily effective. She traveled regularly to share her experience, but always returned to the Second Chance House, which remained her safe haven and greatest source of inspiration. One spring morning, as she walked downtown, Isabella stopped before the mural she had painted at the beginning of it all. The colors were a little faded with time, but the message remained vibrant. Our true wealth lies in what we share. She smiled, remembering the frightened woman who began this journey. The transformation hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it, and the best was yet to come. The community that once fought to avoid demolition was now preparing to expand its horizons. Isabella oversaw the construction of a new annex to the Second Chance House, financed by a consortium of businessmen her father had managed to convince. Each brick laid represented not only physical growth, but the consolidation of a new philosophy, that business and compassion could indeed go hand in hand. The construction site had become a classroom where apprentices from the community gained practical experience. Miguel, with his natural talent for bringing people together, organized an opportunities fair in the expanded city center. Partner companies offered jobs, universities presented scholarship programs, and local micro-entrepreneurs showcased their products. Isabella circulated among the stands, witnessing dreams come true. Donna Maria's son had secured an internship. Carlos was now teaching his workshop to 30 students. Social justice, she understood, was this: creating ladders where before there were only walls. At the height of preparations for the inauguration, Isabella received a tempting offer to lead a national public housing initiative with an impressive salary. The irony did not escape her. The world that had rejected her now wanted her back, but on its terms. She spoke with Miguel about the decision, and his response moved her. Wherever you are most useful is where you should be. My love is not a cage. The courage to let go was as important as the courage to hold on. On the eve of the grand opening, Isabella gave her answer. She refused the national position to focus on local work. Real change happens from the bottom up, she explained to reporters. I want to delve into the roots, not spread branches. That night, revisiting her diary from the time she lived in the mansion, she laughed at her own past anxieties. The transformation had been so profound that she barely recognized the woman who had written those words. The inauguration of the annex became a symbolic event of the new reality that Isabella had helped to build. The mayor of New York attended, along with community leaders and business people, a scenario unthinkable years before. When Robert Harrington spoke alongside Miguel, representing a partnership between worlds once separated, Isabella felt she was witnessing a small miracle of reconciliation. Her father, once an uncompromising defender of profit, now spoke of shared social value. Media coverage focused not on the past conflict, but on the innovative model that emerged from it. Economic journalists wrote about conscious capitalism, while social media celebrated pragmatic activism. Isabella, interviewed by everyone, insisted on sharing the credit. This victory belongs to the community that never gave up, to the volunteers who donated their time, to the donors who believed. Her humility was as genuine as her passion. In the following months, Isabella's foundation became a case study in business schools and social work colleges. She accepted a visiting professorship, not to glorify her story, but to inspire others to find their own paths to impact. Her students admired her not for the wealth she had abandoned, but for the meaningful life she had built, a legacy far more valuable than any monetary inheritance. The relationship with her father deepened on fertile ground. Robert Harrington, gradually retiring from business, now dedicated 70% of his time to philanthropic projects. Father and daughter found common ground in their passion for creating sustainable solutions. He with his analytical mind, she with her community heart. Redemption, Isabella realized, was not a destination, but an ongoing journey that two proud individuals had learned to make together. During a workshop for teenagers, Isabella noticed a particularly talented but visibly discouraged young woman. Lara, 16, lived in a temporary shelter with her mother and younger siblings. What difference will my art make? The girl challenged, echoing the doubts Isabella had initially had. The question was an invitation to close the mentee's cycle. The one who had been inspired was now inspiring others. Isabella dedicated special time to Lara, showing her how art could be both a personal expression and a tool for social change. Together they organized an exhibition of works by young people in vulnerable situations, and the success was so resounding that two commercial galleries offered space for permanent exhibitions. Seeing Lara gain confidence and see her talent recognized was for Isabella like seeing her own journey of overcoming adversity reflected in another, more powerful than any award. Miguel then proposed a youth leadership program. identifying and nurturing community talent. Laura became his first intern, and the sparkle in the young woman's eyes as she planned her first independent project moved Isabella to tears. She saw how the seed planted years before was now blossoming in multiple directions, creating a forest of possibilities where before there had only been barren concrete. Hope, indeed, had deep roots. At a strategic planning meeting, Isabella looked around the table, Miguel coordinating, Laura presenting innovative ideas, her father contributing business insights, community members offering opinions with practical wisdom. She then understood that she had built something bigger than herself, a transformative ecosystem that would continue to grow without her constant presence. This realization didn't sadden her, but filled her with profound peace. The true legacy wasn't in what one left for others, but in what one empowered others to build. The relationship between Isabella and Miguel matured like a fine wine, each day revealing new layers of depth and understanding. At a simple surprise birthday dinner organized by Miguel on the rooftop of the center, overlooking the city lights, Isabella realized she had found not a fairy tale Prince Charming, but a real-life partner. He hadn't gifted her with jewels or luxurious trips, but with a guest book of everyone she had helped, a treasure of immeasurable value. When Miguel took her to meet his family in Puerto Rico, Isabella experienced a warm welcome that had nothing to do with her background or wealth. Miguel's grandmother, an 80-year-old woman full of wisdom, took her hands and said, "You brought my grandson back to life. He laughs for real now." In that simple house filled with family photos and laughter, Isabella understood that true human connections were the greatest wealth anyone could accumulate. Back in New York, they began planning a future together, not with grandiose plans, but with shared dreams of continuing the work they loved. They decided to live in a simple apartment near the center, where they could walk to work and always be available to the community. The intentional simplicity of their lives contrasted radically with the oppressive luxury of their past, and each morning waking up next to Miguel was a confirmation of their choices. On a quiet Sunday, while organizing an animal adoption fair at the community center, Miguel surprised Isabella with a simple and sincere marriage proposal, without an expensive ring or audience, just the two of them and some rescued puppies as witnesses. The yes came naturally, like the logical conclusion of a journey that had transformed them individually and united them forever. Their love was living proof that the greatest miracles happen in the most ordinary moments. The news of the engagement reached Isabella's father unexpectedly, through Donna Maria, who couldn't contain her happiness upon meeting Robert Harrington during her weekly visit to the center. His reaction surprised everyone. Instead of the disapproval Isabella feared, he organized an intimate dinner to celebrate. "Miguel gave you back the daughter I had lost," Robert confessed to his fiancée, in a rare moment of vulnerability that marked the beginning of a new relationship between the two men. Planning the wedding became a community project. The children from the art workshops created the illustrations for the invitations. Donna Maria and other ladies from the community volunteered to cook the banquet, and Carlos and his carpentry students built the altar from reclaimed wood. Every detail carried the DNA of the place that had united them, a wedding that celebrated not only the love of two people, but the love of an entire community for them. On the day of the ceremony, held in the garden of the community center, Robert Harrington did something no one expected. During his speech, he announced the permanent donation of the land where the Second Chance House stood to Isabella and Miguel's foundation. "Today I am not losing a daughter, but gaining a son and a cause for the rest of my life," he declared, with tears in his eyes that he did not try to hide. It was complete redemption, the closing of a cycle of reconciliation. As they danced their first song as husband and wife, under the string lights the children had strung in the trees, Isabella whispered in Miguel's ear, "I never imagined happiness could be so simple." The community that had welcomed her when she lost everything was now celebrating her new beginning, proving that the deepest transformation happens when we allow love, not fear, to guide our choices. The first year of marriage brought professional and personal growth. The foundation, now under the experienced management of Robert Harrington, expanded its work to 3 other cities, always maintaining the community model that had proven so effective. Isabella and Miguel traveled regularly to oversee the new projects, but always returned to the Second Chance House, which remained their safe haven and source of inspiration. The big surprise came one autumn morning when Isabella discovered she was pregnant. The news spread through the community like wildfire, and the collective joy was so intense that even Miguel, normally reserved, wept in Carlos's arms in the middle of the cafeteria. The child on the way represented not only the continuation of their love, but the embodiment of everything they had built together, the next generation of a new way of life. The baby shower became another community celebration, with symbolic and meaningful gifts. A patchwork quilt made by all the women at the center, a mobile with small wooden sculptures created by Carlos's students, a storybook illustrated by the children from the art workshops. Each gift told a part of the journey that had brought Isabella and Miguel there, weaving the child who was arriving into the fabric of the community that would receive her. As they were organizing the baby's room in the simple apartment above the center, Isabella stopped suddenly, her hands resting on her growing belly. "We are bringing this child into a world that we helped to make a little bit better," she said to Miguel, her voice heavy with emotion. He hugged her, looking out the window at the vibrant movement of the community below. Hope now had a heartbeat, and the future had never seemed so full of bright possibilities. Labor began on a rainy spring morning, while Isabella and Miguel were finalizing preparations for a new exhibition downtown. Alerted by a message from Miguel, the community spontaneously formed a support network. Donna Maria organized a prayer vigil. Carlos coordinated meals for the coming days, and the children made drawings to decorate the hospital room. Each person contributed what they could, weaving a web of compassion that would sustain the couple. At the hospital, while awaiting the birth, Robert Harrington surprised everyone by arriving not as the imposing executive he usually is, but as an anxious grandfather. For the first time in decades, he left his work phone off, focusing entirely on the moment. When he took his daughter's hand during a strong contraction, Isabella saw in his eyes the man her father could have been, and perhaps, finally, was becoming. Transformation, she understood, was never too late for those willing to change. Sophia's birth was quick and intense, like everything else in Isabella's life. When the little one came into the world, her first cry echoed through the room like a new beginning for everyone. Miguel, holding his daughter for the first time, whispered, "She already has a whole community waiting for her." In that sacred moment, Isabella understood that the greatest act of courage was not facing the world, but bringing new life into it, believing that it was worthwhile. The journey home turned into a joyful procession. Upon arriving at the community center, they found the courtyard decorated with colorful flags and a hand-painted sign, "Welcome Sophia, our newest hope." Each hug, each simple gift, each tear of shared happiness confirmed that the child belonged not only to Isabella and Miguel, but to an entire village that had formed against all odds. Isabella's redemption was complete, not in what she had received, but in what she could now offer her daughter. Sophia grew up surrounded by the warmth of the community, her cradle rocked by hands that knew both pain and hope. Robert Harrington, now Grandpa Robert, had become a daily visitor, trading corporate meetings for hours with his granddaughter. He built Sophia the same kind of cradle Isabella had had, but this time with his own hands, learning basic carpentry from Carlos. The grandfather's transformation was perhaps the most surprising, the titan of concrete discovering peace in manual labor. Motherhood brought Isabella a new understanding of activism. She began to focus on programs for single mothers and vulnerable children, creating a support network that she herself would have benefited from during the difficult early months. The center inaugurated a community daycare, where mothers could leave their children while they worked or studied, a simple service that made a monumental difference in the lives of families. Each new initiative was born not from theory, but from real experiences. Miguel discovered himself to be a natural father, his boundless patience and ability to listen making him a favorite among the children at the center. He and Isabella found a balance between work and family, often taking Sophia to meetings in her stroller, fully integrating their personal and professional lives. The community saw the couple not as distant leaders, but as real people navigating the same challenges everyone faces, and this authenticity further strengthened the bonds that united them. On a sunny Sunday, during Sophia's first birthday, Isabella watched the scene in the center's courtyard, her father laughing with Donna Maria while rocking his granddaughter, Miguel teaching the older children how to plant a community garden, Lara, now his assistant, organizing the games. The life she had built was richer than any childhood fantasy because it was real, imperfect, and profoundly meaningful. She hugged Miguel and whispered, "We built our own castle, and the people are the bricks." With Sophia already walking and speaking her first words, the foundation reached impressive milestones: 5 community centers in operation, more than 1,000 families assisted, and dozens of young university students who had gone through the programs. Isabella was frequently invited to give talks, but she always brought community members along to share their own stories. She understood that her role was not to be the star, but to amplify voices that were traditionally unheard. Lara, the young woman Isabella had mentored, was now studying architecture on a full scholarship and was already planning the expansion of 2 centers. Seeing her success was like witnessing the most beautiful blossoming of her work for Isabella, proof that true impact was measured not in numbers, but in lives transformed. Lara's overcoming of challenges inspired other young women in the community to dream big, creating a ripple effect of positive ambition that no traditional social program could replicate. Robert Harrington, completely retired from business, devoted himself entirely to the foundation. His business acumen proved invaluable in creating sustainable models, but his greatest contribution was emotional. He had become everyone's grandfather, offering wise advice and a listening ear to young and old alike. The reconciliation between father and daughter had been so complete that it was difficult to remember that they had once been on opposite sides of an urban battle. In a strategic planning meeting, Isabella proposed her most ambitious project, to create a national network of centers based on the Second Chance House model, but always maintaining local and community management. "We don't want to replicate ourselves," she explained. "We want to empower other communities to find their own solutions." As she presented her vision, she looked at Sophia, drawing on the floor, and at Miguel, proudly standing beside her. Her destiny, once a gilded cage, had become an infinite field of possibilities. The network of community centers expanded to other cities, each adapting the original model to its specific needs. In Chicago, one center focused on technology training programs for young people. In Detroit, the focus shifted to revitalizing abandoned industrial spaces through art. Isabella traveled periodically to visit these new locations, but always as a consultant, never as a controller. Her philosophy was one of autonomy with support. Miguel took over the national coordination of the network, his natural talent for connecting people proving invaluable. He developed a system of community exchange, where volunteers from different cities shared experiences and best practices. Knowledge flowed horizontally, not vertically, a revolutionary approach that challenged traditional models of philanthropy. Social justice, they discovered, began with egalitarian structures. Sophia, now 3 years old, accompanied her parents on some trips, her presence bringing lightness to serious meetings. Children have a unique way of breaking down barriers, and her laughter echoing in the corridors of the centers reminded everyone of the fundamental purpose of the work, to create a better world for future generations. Robert Harrington frequently traveled with his family, his renewed enthusiasm contagious. At a national gathering of community leaders in Atlanta, Isabella witnessed something extraordinary. Lara, now a graduate in architecture, presenting the design for a fully sustainable center that she herself had created. The young woman who had once doubted the power of her own voice now commanded the attention of an audience of experts. The complete mentorship cycle filled Isabella with a profound peace. The legacy wasn't in buildings, but in the people who empowered them. With expansion came new challenges. The foundation faced its first crisis when one of its centers in another city suffered embezzlement by a dishonest administrator. The news deeply shook Isabella, not because of the financial loss, but because of the breach of trust. She and Miguel immediately traveled to deal with the situation personally, prioritizing complete transparency with the local community. The experience led to a complete overhaul of the governance systems. Robert Harrington, with his corporate experience, spearheaded the development of rigorous financial controls that still preserved local autonomy. The solution found was elegant. Each center would have an oversight committee made up of community members, volunteers, and a foundation representative. Distributed, not centralized, power. The episode, though painful, proved to be an opportunity for collective overcoming. The affected community organized itself to recover lost resources through fundraising events, demonstrating a resilience that moved even the most skeptical. In the end, the crisis strengthened the bonds between all the centers, creating an even deeper sense of solidarity. Isabella, reflecting on what had happened, realized that mistakes were inevitable in any significant journey. What mattered was not perfection, but the ability to learn and grow from failures. She openly shared this reflection in her newsletter, modeling an organizational culture where vulnerability was not weakness, but a source of collective wisdom. The transformation, she now understood, included accepting that some cycles involved both losses and gains. While the national network grew, the Second Chance House in New York remained the heart of the work. The original location had expanded to occupy an entire city block, with new spaces for workshops, a small community theater, and even an industrial kitchen where trainees prepared meals for local schools. What had begun as resistance now flourished as a model of inclusive urban development. Sophia, now 5 years old, was beginning to understand the special significance of the place where she had grown up. She helped Donna Maria water the community garden, worked in Carlos's workshop with her own toy tools, and sat attentively during planning meetings. The community was not something abstract to her. It was the fabric of her daily life, a reality as natural as the air she breathed. Miguel and Isabella, after years of intense work, consciously slowed down their travel pace to focus on deepening their local work. They discovered that the true impact lay not in the quantity of projects, but in the quality of the human connections they cultivated. Their roles evolved from frontline leaders to mentors behind the scenes, empowering the next generation of community leaders. At an event commemorating the 10th anniversary of the foundation, Isabella looked at the crowd in the courtyard of the Second Chance House and saw the materialization of her wildest dreams. Former homeless people were now monitors. Children who attended the first workshops were now university students. Volunteers had become family friends. The hopes that once seemed naive had taken root in a reality stronger than concrete. The true miracle, she understood, was the stubborn persistence of human love against all odds. An unexpected proposal arrived from New York City Hall. Isabella was invited to join a sustainable urban development committee, representing community voices. The irony did not escape her. The same system she had challenged now demanded her expertise. After careful consideration with Miguel and the community, she accepted, but with one condition, that the meetings be held on a rotating basis in different community centers, not in distant government offices. The committee's first meeting at the Second Chance House was an eye-opening experience for everyone. Community leaders sat alongside real estate developers, urban planners, and government representatives. Carlos, now coordinator of professional training programs, presented impressive statistics on the economic return of investing in communities. Donna Maria, with her simple wisdom, reminded everyone that cities are made of people, not buildings. Sophia, now a curious and articulate 7-year-old, made a surprise appearance during the coffee break. "My mother says that the smartest cities are those where all children can play safely," she declared to the impressed committee members. Her spontaneous intervention became the most talked-about moment of the meeting, a powerful reminder that urban planning needed to serve future generations. At the end of the day, Isabella watched the participants exchanging contact information and making plans to visit other communities. Destiny had brought her back to the center of power, but this time on her own terms. She no longer needed to run from the system. Now she had the tools and the confidence to transform it from within, always anchored by the community that supported her. Lara, now 25, and a graduate in architecture with honors, was promoted to director of special projects at the foundation. Her first major challenge was to lead the revitalization of a historic neighborhood in Baltimore, applying the principles she had learned at the Second Chance House. Isabella watched with maternal pride as the young woman who had once doubted her own worth now led complex meetings with developers and authorities with impressive confidence. Sophia, growing up in this rich environment of strong female role models, developed her own unique interest. She loved watching the birds that visited the community garden and drawing them in her notebook. Miguel, noticing his daughter's interest, created a small bird-watching club for the children at the center. Isabella watched with tenderness how each member of the family found their own unique way to contribute to the whole. No talent was too small when offered with love. Robert Harrington, now 70, dedicated himself to documenting the history of the foundation. His book, From Concrete to Community, became required reading in urban planning and social work courses. In interviews, he always credited his daughter for having rediscovered him as a human being. Complete redemption manifested itself in this genuine humility. The man once defined by his power now found meaning in serving. On a quiet Saturday, while the family celebrated Sophia's 8th birthday, the little girl made an impromptu toast. "Thank you for teaching me that we can fix the world starting with our own neighborhood." The simplicity of the statement perfectly captured the philosophy that guided her work. Isabella exchanged a glance with Miguel. Her greatest legacy wasn't in the buildings or programs, but in the values she lived through her daughter. The foundation had reached a scale that required careful restructuring. Miguel proposed an innovative model, Instead of a traditional hierarchy, they would create an impact matrix where each center operated autonomously but shared resources and knowledge through a digital platform. Technology, which so often isolated people, would be used to build bridges between geographically distant communities. Isabella focused her energy on creating a fellowship program for young community leaders. The select group spent a year immersed in different centers, learning and practice before returning to their home communities with concrete projects. The initiative became so prestigious that it received thousands of applications annually, proving that a new generation yearned for models of social change based on authenticity and human connection. Sophia, now 9 years old, started her first social project, an exchange of children's books between different centers. With her grandfather's help, she developed a simple system where children could exchange books and share reviews through drawings. The organic success of the initiative demonstrated that community spirit was not something that could be taught, but that it flourished naturally when nurtured. The next generation was already internalizing the values of the work. During an impact assessment, the numbers revealed something extraordinary. For every dollar invested in community centers, $7 in social value were generated through employment, the local economy, and reduced public service costs. But the real miracle, Isabella insisted, wasn't in the statistics, but in the individual stories of overcoming adversity that never appeared in the reports. The true measures of success were invisible to the eye, but palpable in the heart. The foundation's story crossed borders when a European magazine published a detailed profile of the unique model Isabella and Miguel had developed. The article highlighted how they combined business efficiency with community compassion, creating a hybrid that defied traditional categorizations. The result was an influx of visitors from other countries wanting to learn from their experience, from Norway to Japan, from Brazil to South Africa. Sophia, now 10 years old, became an unwitting little ambassador when a Swedish delegation visited the Second Chance House. With the natural ease of a child, she explained to the impressed visitors how the community garden system worked, showed them the birds' nests she monitored, and introduced her friends from different backgrounds. Her fluidity in navigating between worlds that many adults consider separate was perhaps the most eloquent proof of the model's success. Miguel developed an immersion program for international visitors, where they spent a week living and working in the community. The experience transformed not only the visitors, but also the local residents, who discovered the universal value of their practical knowledge. Hope, they discovered, was a language everyone understood when demonstrated through concrete actions. When Harvard University invited them to a seminar on social innovation, Isabella insisted that Lara and 2 young community leaders be co-presenters. "The future doesn't need more lone voices," she explained to the organizers. "It needs diverse choruses." The success of the collective presentation confirmed that the shared leadership model was not only morally correct, it was strategically smarter. With growth came new financial challenges. Expansion into other cities and countries required more resources than private donations could sustain. Robert Harrington, using his business expertise, led the development of a social business model where some of the center's services generated revenue to subsidize free programs. The community bakery, for example, began supplying local cafes, creating jobs and income. Isabella faced criticism from purists who believed that any commercialization would corrupt the social mission. She responded patiently, explaining that financial sustainability was a form of courage, ensuring that the work would survive regardless of fluctuations in philanthropic funding. "Temporary charity eases the conscience," she said, "but social businesses transform realities." Miguel focused on developing partnerships with small and medium-sized local businesses, creating a network of mutual support where everyone benefited. A carpentry workshop that benefited from the foundation's training program now donates part of its profits back. A restaurant that hired cooks trained in the culinary workshops offered discounted meals to families in the community. The emerging circular economy was more resilient than any traditional donation model. Sophia, observing these discussions about money and mission, asked a simple question during dinner. Why do people think that making money by helping others is wrong? The question, coming from a child, disarmed years of complex debates. Sometimes, Isabella reflected, the deepest wisdom comes from those who haven't yet learned to complicate the obvious. Upon completing 15 years of work, the foundation held a celebration that brought together hundreds of people whose lives had intersected with Isabella's journey. There were the first residents who resisted eviction, The initial volunteers who believed when all seemed lost, the donors who bet on an untested model. Each story shared was a testament to the power of collective perseverance. Miguel presented the data on the accumulated impact. More than 10,000 people directly benefited, 15 centers in operation, 3 generations of community leaders trained. But the numbers, he insisted, were only the surface. The true legacy lay in the intangible changes, in the rebuilt trust, the created sense of belonging, the restored hope where before there was only despair. Lara, now 30 and CEO of the network, announced the next chapter, a social investment fund that would finance entrepreneurs from disadvantaged communities. Robert Harrington, as honorary chairman of the fund, shared how his vision of success had radically transformed. Before, I measured my success by the size of my net worth, he confessed. Now I measure it by the number of lives we have been able to positively impact. At the close of the event, Isabella looked at the crowd and saw the face of her transformation reflected in hundreds of individual stories. She had begun by seeking purpose for her own life and had found something greater, a movement built not around her persona, but around shared values. The true miracle was not in what she had achieved, but in what she had enabled others to achieve through her. At 45, Isabella was discovering a new phase in life, less about doing and more about being. She deliberately reduced her travels and public engagements, focusing on one-on-one mentorships with emerging community leaders. Her experience was now her greatest asset, and she generously shared it, knowing that the work would continue to flourish through others. Personal transformation, she understood, was an ongoing process, not a final destination. Miguel, always the balanced partner, dedicated himself to documenting the lessons learned over the years. His book, Weaving Communities, became a practical guide for organizations worldwide. He traveled periodically for workshops, but always returned to base, where he felt most useful. The couple discovered that their roles naturally evolved, from agents of change to guardians of wisdom, and this transition brought them profound satisfaction. Sophia, now a 15-year-old with her mother's curious mind and compassionate heart, started her own project, a podcast where she interviewed young activists from diverse backgrounds. The show, produced with simple equipment in the center's media studio, quickly gained an audience among her generation. Isabella watched with admiration as her daughter found her own voice and her own way to contribute, a legacy living, breathing, and evolving. Robert Harrington, at 75, had become the unofficial historian of the movement. His memoirs, handwritten in notebooks that filled an entire bookshelf, captured not only facts, but the emotions, the failures, and the small, unseen triumphs that made up the true story. He would read excerpts to Sophia, who would digitize and organize them, creating a bridge between generations that represented everything they had worked for. The foundation faced its greatest challenge when a global economic crisis threatened to close several centers. Instead of retreating, Isabella and Miguel led a courageous reinvention, merging with 2 complementary organizations, creating a more resilient and diverse network. The process was painful, requiring everyone to relinquish some of their traditional territory, but it resulted in a stronger entity with a wider reach. Lara, now in the executive leadership of the new organization, implemented digital technologies that allowed geographically distant communities to collaborate in real time. Virtual reality programs allowed seniors in urban centers to visit rural projects, and vice versa. Technology, when guided by human values, became a tool for genuine connection, not isolation. Sophia, influenced by her love of nature, which she had cultivated since childhood, launched an environmental sustainability initiative in all the centers. Her Green Communities project not only reduced the ecological impact, but also created jobs in renewable energy and urban agriculture. Isabella watched with pride as her daughter naturally integrated the lessons of the past with the urgent needs of the future. At a strategic planning retreat, the family and leadership team looked ahead to the next 20 years. Robert Harrington, with the clarity that only age brings, summarized, "We started by saving a building, then we saved a community, then we created a model. Now our job is to inspire a global movement." The vision had expanded organically, like a tree that, as it grows, discovers its roots intertwine with other forests. The House of Second Chance, the original center, was preparing for its biggest expansion yet, the acquisition of the neighboring building that had once threatened to demolish the community. The poetic irony didn't escape anyone. Isabella walked through the empty rooms of the new space, imagining the possibilities. A school for traditional crafts, a center for social innovation, a breeding ground for community entrepreneurship. Destiny, she reflected, had a peculiar sense of humor. Miguel, now with honestly earned gray hair, coordinated a community effort to collectively design the new space. Packed open meetings, participatory design workshops, voting on every aspect. The process was as important as the result. The community no longer needed saving. Now it was fully capable of saving itself and others. This collective redemption was the ultimate triumph. Sophia, at 18 years old, gave a moving speech at the opening ceremony of the new space. I grew up seeing that real change happens when we stop waiting for heroes and become a community, she told the attentive audience. My legacy is not what I will inherit, but what I will continue to build with all of you. Her words resonated not only in the physical space, but in the hearts of everyone present. That night, Isabella and Miguel dined with Robert Harrington and Sophia in the apartment they still kept above the original center. Through the window, they saw the lights of the neighborhood they had transformed, not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of courage, compassion, and stubborn persistence. The circle had come full circle, but not closed, expanding in ever-widening spirals, touching lives they would never know, in places they would never visit. True transformation, Isabella understood, was eternally incomplete, always renewing itself through those it inspired. 20 years after the start of the journey, the network of community centers had become a global movement with a presence on 3 continents. Isabella, now 50, took on the role of chair of the board, focusing her energy on mentoring the next generation of leaders. Her greatest pride was not in the impressive numbers, but in the fact that the work now thrived independently of her direct leadership, the true measure of sustainability. Miguel dedicated himself to creating an online community university, where practical knowledge about community development was shared freely. The course, From Conflict to Community, based on his experience with Isabella, became one of the most popular, reaching leaders in more than 80 countries. Hope, they discovered, could be scaled when knowledge was shared openly. Sophia, trained in urban studies and anthropology, brought a rigorous academic perspective to complement the family's practical knowledge. Her first book, Growing Up Between Worlds, explored the intersections between privilege and social responsibility through the rare lens of having lived this reality since childhood. This academic work lent further legitimacy to the model her parents had developed through practice. Robert Harrington, at 80 years old, had become the beloved patriarch of the entire network. His story of transformation from real estate magnate to community advocate especially inspired those who doubted that people could fundamentally change. As his health began to decline, he insisted on continuing to visit the centers, saying that each visit recharged his batteries of hope. A global pandemic tested the resilience of the network like never before. Community centers around the world quickly adapted, organizing food distribution, connecting isolated seniors with volunteers, converting spaces into community testing centers. The crisis revealed that the social infrastructure they had built was as essential as any traditional public service. Isabella and Miguel worked tirelessly to coordinate the network's global response, their marriage and partnership being tested and strengthened like never before. Sleepless nights, difficult decisions about resource allocation, the constant fear for the health of the most vulnerable. Each challenge overcome confirmed that the model they created was not only good, but necessary in times of crisis. Sophia, using her native digital skills, created a platform that connected centers in different countries to share solutions in real time. When a center in Milan developed an effective protocol for drug distribution, centers in Mumbai and Mexico City could implement it within days. Global collaboration showed its deepest value when national borders closed. Emerging from the crisis, the network discovered something extraordinary. While many traditional organizations struggled, they had grown, not in size, but in depth. The communities they served had developed an unprecedented level of cohesion and resilience. The collective overcoming during those difficult years proved, definitively, that the social fabric they had helped to weave was strong enough to withstand even the greatest storms. With the network functioning in a mature and independent way, Isabella and Miguel began a careful transition to a quieter phase of life. They bought a small house in the countryside, not to retire, but to create a space for reflection and renewal for community leaders. The Second Chance retreat quickly became a sanctuary where weary activists could regain their focus and energy. Sophia, now 30 years old, and with significant international experience, was unanimously elected to assume global leadership of the network. The transition was natural and seamless, the ultimate proof that they had built something that would transcend their generation. Isabella watched with a mixture of maternal and professional pride as her daughter implemented bold innovations she herself would never have imagined. Robert Harrington passed away peacefully at the age of 85. Surrounded by family and dozens of friends from the community, he considered his extended family. His funeral was a vibrant celebration of a life transformed, with stories told in multiple languages by people whose lives he touched. At his request, his simple coffin bore the inscription of only one word: gratitude. In a moving ceremony, the network was officially renamed the Harrington Mendoza Foundation, honoring both Robert's legacy and Isabella's mother's maiden name. The circle had come full circle, the three generations now eternally intertwined in work that would continue to evolve. Redemption was no longer a personal quest, but an institutionalized principle. Isabella and Miguel, now in their 60s, divided their time between retreats in the countryside and leisurely trips to visit the centers they still considered their spiritual home. Their love, forged in the fire of activism and polished by decades of partnership, had deepened into something as comfortable as their favorite clothes. They discovered that there was profound beauty in this phase of life, the joy of witnessing the blossoming of seeds they had planted. Sophia married an educator she met through her work in the network. The wedding, held in the garden of the original Second Chance house, brought together communities from around the world in a celebration that seemed to encapsulate everything they had worked for. As Isabella danced with her daughter under the same string lights that had decorated her own wedding, she felt the profound satisfaction of knowing that the cycle of love and service would continue. On a quiet day at the retreat, Isabella received a visit from a young heiress to a tech fortune, seeking guidance on how to use her privilege meaningfully. As they walked through the garden, Isabella shared her story not as a model to be copied, but as an example that each person must find their own authentic path to service. Transformation, she explained, begins when we stop trying to be heroes and start being human. As night fell, Isabella sat on the porch with Miguel, their hands intertwined as they had been for so many decades. They gazed at the starry sky, the same sky that had witnessed every step of their extraordinary shared journey. They hadn't fixed the world, but they had fixed their piece of it, and inspired others to do the same. And in this quiet realization, they found the profound peace that comes only from a life lived in alignment with deeper values. Destiny wasn't something that happened to you, but something you co-created with every conscious choice. How many gilded cages still imprison you without you realizing it? What silent invitations has your soul ignored in the name of security? Isabella's story reminds us that the greatest courage lies not in grand heroic gestures, but in taking the first small, trembling step towards what truly matters. And you? Have you ever stopped to listen to that inner whisper that questions whether you're living your authentic life or just fulfilling expectations? What community needs your unique voice? What talent do you have hidden that could be a seed of transformation for someone? The invitation has been extended. Don't wait for imminent demolition to discover your purpose. Start today. A small act of courage, a single word of truth, a decision that honors who you truly are. The world needs your unique gift, not the edited version of you that tries to please everyone. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. Our channel is dedicated to reminding you that transformation is possible, that redemption awaits each of us, and that hope is not naivete, but the most radical form of courage. Your journey begins now.